There is a historical lie you have probably believed your whole life, that medieval people drank beer all day because the water would kill them. It makes sense until you do the math. You cannot brew millions of gallons of ale using toxic sludge. You need oceans of pure, clean water. How did a crowded 13th century city actually get it? They didn't drink from the filthy river. The reality is, medieval cities ran massive, taxpayer-funded engineering projects to survive. Surviving records from London in 1236 prove it. I'm going to show you their forgotten underground aqueducts, the brutal financial penalties enforced by the medieval water police, and a strictly regulated delivery network that operated just like a modern app. In 1236, the citizens of London hit a breaking point. The local urban wells were getting choked by the city's heavy industries. Tanners, butchers, and dyers were dumping their runoff directly into the ground. Drinking from the Thames River was a desperate last resort. They didn't just accept this as a dirty fact of medieval life. They bought a solution. City officials went to a wealthy landowner named Gilbert de Sandford and struck a highly expensive, strictly legal deal. We still have the exact surviving charter. Sandford granted London the right to tap into the crystal-clear springs of Tyburn, located miles outside the city walls. Having pure water out in the countryside doesn't help a baker in the city center. To bridge that gap, they built the Great Conduit. We usually assume complex plumbing died with the Roman Empire. That is a complete myth. For centuries, monks had been quietly perfecting hydraulic engineering to run their private abbeys. The merchants of London simply took the monks' blueprints, scaled them up, and laid down a pipeline of hollowed-out elm trunks and solid lead. Driven entirely by gravity, it stretched for nearly 3 miles. It ended in a giant lead-lined stone cistern right in the middle of Cheapside, London's busiest commercial street. This wasn't a chaotic free-for-all. The water was so valuable that the city appointed official wardens of the conduit. Their entire job was to patrol the pipe's route, inspect the lead seams for leaks, and hunt down rogue citizens who tried to illegally tap the main line. They even locked the spigots at night, because local commercial brewers kept trying to drain the entire system for free. Think of it like hacking the city's power grid today. Stealing clean water was a serious corporate crime. They had the engineering, and they had fresh water flowing. Building a pipeline is actually the easy part. The real nightmare is stopping human beings from turning a pristine water source into a toxic dump. To keep the water clean, medieval authorities had to become absolutely ruthless. The biggest threat to medieval clean water wasn't a lack of technology. It was human laziness. It is always easier to dump your garbage into the nearest river than to haul it outside the city walls. Medieval governments didn't just cross their fingers and hope for the best. They created the equivalent of strict environmental protection agencies. In London, neighborhood councils called ward motes passed strict ordinances. They made it a crime to wash clothes, clean fish, or leave waste anywhere near the public water conduits. To see how aggressive this legal battle really got, you have to look at the city of Coventry. By the early 1400s, Coventry was a booming industrial hub, and local butchers were throwing animal parts and dung straight into the River Sherborne. In 1421, the city government snapped. They recorded a new law in the Coventry City Leet Book. It is a surviving legal manuscript that completely destroys the myth of the dirty, lawless medieval peasant. The law stated that anyone caught dumping filth into the river would be hit with a 40-pence fine. To put that in perspective, an average skilled laborer back then made about 4 pence a day. Dropping trash in the river would instantly cost you 10 days of hard labor. It was a crippling financial penalty designed to terrify citizens into compliance. They didn't just rely on fear either. Medieval cities hired dedicated sanitation workers to clear the waterways. More importantly, they paid informants to rat out their neighbors. If you polluted the public water supply, your own neighbors would turn you in for a bounty, and the city would make you pay. Thanks to heavy engineering and aggressive local laws, the water sitting at the central conduits was safe. This created a brand new physical problem. Water is incredibly heavy. A single imperial gallon weighs 10 pounds. If you were a wealthy merchant, or if you simply lived a mile away from the conduit in the freezing rain, hauling heavy wooden buckets through crowded, muddy streets was a nightmare. You needed someone to do the heavy lifting for you. You needed a premium delivery service. They had exactly that. If you needed water delivered in late medieval London, you couldn't just hire a random guy off the street, not unless you wanted to be scammed. Because clean water from the Great Conduit was so valuable, fraudsters began pulling a dangerous trick. They would dip their buckets into the filthy Thames River and sell it to unsuspecting customers at a premium, claiming it came from the pristine Tyburn Springs. To stop this black market of dirty water, the city cracked down. By 1496, the men carrying water had become so essential to the city's survival that the mayor of London officially recognized them as the Brotherhood of St. Christopher of the Waterbearers. These guys were essentially the highly regulated delivery apps of medieval utilities. They carried heavy, specially marked wooden vessels called tankards on their shoulders, hauling nearly 30 pounds of water per trip from the central conduits directly to the kitchens of wealthy merchants and commercial bakeries. The guild enforced ruthless quality control. If a water bearer was caught drawing water from the river, or if they tried to cut the line at the main cistern, they faced heavy fines or outright expulsion. The city even capped their delivery fees so they couldn't price gouge citizens during a hot summer. The water itself was completely free for anyone willing to walk to the public fountain. But the convenience of having it carried to your front door? That was a highly protected, strictly policed medieval business. Which leaves us with a glaring problem. We have proof of a multi-mile underground pipeline. We have records of brutal environmental fines protecting public health. We have a strictly regulated guild of delivery men making sure the supply stayed pure. They poured enormous amounts of tax money and human labor into securing safe drinking water. If they went through all of this intense, highly engineered trouble to get it, why do we still insist they spent their entire lives terrified of drinking it? The answer has nothing to do with medieval ignorance. It has everything to do with modern ego. It is incredibly comforting to look back at history and imagine our ancestors as filthy, chaotic, and completely lost without modern technology. We like the myth of the beer-drinking peasant because it makes us feel vastly superior to the past. When you put the actual surviving records together, the 3-mile gravity pipelines, the 40-pence environmental fines, the strictly policed delivery guilds, you don't see a society stumbling blindly through the mud. You see city planners, engineers, and lawmakers fighting the exact same urban problems we fight right now. They didn't have electricity or combustion engines, but they had the exact same drive to organize, protect their resources, and survive. The next time you turn on your kitchen faucet and expect clean water to come out, ask yourself, what piece of our modern daily routine will people 1,000 years from now completely misunderstand? If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from. See you in the next one.